What's up guys, it's the Wandering Hermit here. Doing a video for the new 2018 YouTube Pagan Challenge. So I know we're in February now, so I'm a bit late to this party, to be honest. So from what I can tell, we're doing our own sort of subjects, but to do with the letters of the alphabet. So I will do this one very, very quickly about my letters A and B for January, and then I'll do my C and D probably in the next day or two. So, A for me is for, well, alphabets. You'd think, you know, it'd be animals or something like that, but for me, alphabets are extremely important because I've been looking at various different spiritual traditions from around the world for the last 10 to 12 years. Kind of on and off, you know, dipping in, dipping out, kind of going to other areas, looking at those, and then back again. And the common thread that I find in a majority of traditions is some kind of alphabet as a magical system. So, the first that I got involved in naturally through childhood interest would be the ancient Egyptians and the hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphs themselves, as you might know, they have their phonetic value. So they will have an actual sound associated with them in the same way that A is pronounced A or A. But each hieroglyph is also a word. It is also a series of words, because it can mean a phrase. And it also has a musical value as well as a mathematical value. Now, how you combine the Egyptian hieroglyphs can form either sentences or words and sentences, or they can be used as mathematical formula. In many cases, the mathematical formula that is associated with a group of hieroglyphs will actually be correspondent to the words or phrases used. So the mathematics is actually used as a form or another layer of magical invocation. Now the same can be seen in the system of Hebrew writing as well. You'll see that Aleph has, for example, a numerical value of 10. I might be wrong about that, I may be just getting the numerical values mixed up, but each of the 24 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. That's discounting the soffits, which are like the same. For example, bet and vet are technically the same letter, but one's harsh and one's soft. So excluding the soffits, you have 24 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which correspond also to the 24 Norse runes of the Elder Futhark. But I'll go back to that. In the same way, each letter is a phonetic value. Each letter is also a word, and you can combine them to create magical invocations through, forming words. And then, of course, the numerical value kind of factors into that as well, and it's another layer of interpretation. So, alphabets, through my experience, are actually extremely powerful forms of magic. And that's why when we actually write words, we learn to spell them, because words have power. So when you actually form words by combining letters, you are casting a spell. So the words that you use are imbued with a particular energy and with a particular intention. So the words that I'm using now are spelled with certain letters, and those letters will have magical correspondences, and those letters will hold individual power. So when they are combined into words, those words have greater power. It amplifies the intention behind the letters. So I tend to use alphabets quite a lot in my ritual practice. I won't go into massive detail at this point, but naturally I use the runes. I'm doing a lot of rune work at the moment, but I do occasionally use Hebrew letters as well. If I'm doing what they call angel work, I don't like using that term very much, but yeah, angel work. Working in the Solomonic system anyway, or John Dee's system of magic. You use Hebrew letters quite prominently in those. I will combine them with their elemental correspondences for, just generally casting a circle, or I'll use them, the letters that are specifically corresponding to my intention. I also try to think of number sequences which correspond to that. So if I'm actually trying to manifest something basically something from nothing, then I will try to use number correspondences which are in keeping with the phi ratio, because the phi ratio is the mathematical representation of physical manifestation from nothing. It's order from chaos. That is just one example of a way that I would use maths in relation to the alphabet that I'm using to amplify my intention. So going back to the runes are, to me, one of the most powerful systems of alphabetic magic, or symbolic magic in that sense. But at the same time, I can't help but feel as though that alphabetical system is incomplete, because in the same way that the hieroglyphics and the Hebrew letters have their numerical values, you don't really see that as much with the runes of the Futhark. And that to me is indicative of the fact that even though the northern tribes traded quite a lot, they didn't trade in currency. They didn't need a figurative form of numerical system. They literally traded in physical amounts of things, like 2 chickens or whatever. They didn't have to tally things up and literally record a detailed numerical system. Therefore, they wouldn't have held as much value in numbers as they did in their letters. So the Norse alphabet is missing the numerical value. I think that can be changed, and I am working on trying to create numerical correspondences to the runes of the Elder Futhark. I mean, in detail, so that I can apply the runes in a similar way as the hieroglyphs and the Hebrew letters. The Greek letters as well, the ancient Greek alphabet is formed very, very similarly to those of the Hebrew letters. Again, they have numerical values, because the ancient Greeks, as you see with the school of Pythagoras, were very, very interested in mathematics. So when it comes to alphabets, I can't help but think that words and numbers are inseparable. When it comes to verbal communication, what we're actually doing is taking physical manifestation of mathematical principles and projecting them. So in the same way that certain tones, certain sound frequencies have a numerical value. That's why we have like the solfeggio system, which is based on Pythagorean mathematics of 3, 6, and 9. When we speak, we're incorporating those vibrational frequencies and their mathematical values into what we say. This to me is another indication as to why a lot of old traditions chant in certain pitches or in certain tones. Usually with old Latin chants, you'd find it in C major, but that's because of its numerical value. A lot of Muslim chants are done in the key of F, which again, it has its own mathematical and thus magical correspondence. So it's very, very interesting to look at alphabets and compare alphabets and actually build tables of correspondence for those alphabets. Ogham, I think, as another alphabetical system, if you can call it that. I personally like to think of it as an alphabetical system. That's something that I also need to study and try to tie to the runes and other systems. And I believe that it's also possible to take the medieval witches alphabet and try to incorporate that in as well. So that is the work I'm going to be doing over this coming year. Now, for B, I've been thinking B. What do I work with beginning with B? Belial. There we go. Now, one of my favourite YouTubers, Asbjorn Torvald, he actually did a video recently about which one was it? I can't actually remember what the subject of the video was, but he uses an analogy in that video where a woman is trying to summon Belial and it goes wrong, she burns a house down. Now, Belial, for those of you who don't know, is a deity or a spirit which crops up in very early biblical texts and in some early Jewish texts. He is regarded as a demon or one of the archprinces of hell, and was one of the key deities that John Dee tried to work with. Now, Belial is regarded as the Prince of Iniquity, which is rather interesting. Now, Belial is a spirit that I actually communicate with quite regularly, and I've got a lot of negative feedback because of this from people. People who, you know, tend to jump to conclusions and say, what are you working with the demon for? Now, this is where I disagree with a lot of people when it comes to working with spirit. I don't think necessarily there are positive and negative spirits. I believe that there are positive and negative principles as part of the creative web. There are principles which aren't in keeping with what the Norse would call the web of weird or fate. They're not part of that universal structure, and they can worm their way in and disrupt things. But the spirits we work with, the spirits that we can actually invoke and communicate with, I don't believe they do originate from outside of that system of creation. I believe they are part of it. I believe that they are neutral forces of nature, which can be turned to positive or negative uses depending on your intentions. So, I didn't enter into this relationship with Belial with the assumption that it was a negative entity. I believed it was a dangerous power, and one that could be potentially destructive if not treated properly. But I entered into this communication with a great degree of respect and reverence, because at that point I was of the understanding that spirits were above and beyond us, and, you know, greater in power and, you know, transcendent, and thus to be revered or feared even. So when I first communicated with Belial, he came to me in a dream in which he presented himself as a man on the top, but from his waist down was the body of a serpent. He had great wings on his back and ram's horns which came around. And I didn't know what this deity was. He didn't give me his name. But he presented himself to me with a staff, and he taught me certain things about my inner realm, which I'd only just been introduced to. We each have these internal dimensions that we can explore through meditation. And it's a very, very powerful tool to go into and explore, because within that realm are symbols as to, you know, parts of your psychological makeup, you know, your spiritual archetypes and such things. So it's a good place to reflect upon yourself and communicate with your patron deities or your spirit guides or anything else. So Belial basically took me on a guided tour through this inner realm of mine. And he showed me certain things. He showed me there was like a stone with markings in it that I couldn't read, and, you know, there was a pool with a portal in it that took me to another part, and there was you know, a ruined temple there, and there was, you know, a dark area of the forest that no one will go to, and other such things. And he helped me understand these things. And only a few months ago, Belial presented himself in that realm as I was just on a guided meditation to go through one of a trial that I'd set myself anyway. And he appeared to me on this heath, and there was this giant wooden structure of like a stag, a wooden stag, and he was robed. He presented himself as a man robed in black, carrying this torch, like similar to the light bearer. I think he's like, I see him as the male manifestation of what you'd call Hecate, the torch bearer. So he is one facet of the dark god, I kind of see him as, in a sense, a kind of nexus point between the principles of Ares, the Greek god of war, and Kununos, the dark god of nature, because he kind of embodies both of those deities to me. He kind of takes those forms interchangeably and actually switches between them, you know, whilst I'm communicating with them. So, anyway, yeah, he took his torch and he lit the wooden stag. And then he shed his cloak by, like, letting it catch fire so it burnt away. And he said, this is burning away the veil of illusion. This is burning away your past self, everything that you think you are but are not. And then he proceeded to motion for me to follow him into the fire, which I did. And he led me into the stone chamber. And it was completely enclosed, except for one small, well, I say small, one opening at one end of the chamber. And he said basically that the cave entrance is guarded by a great serpent, and you have to basically submit yourself to the serpent and walk forth without fear. And this dragon poked its head through this big hole in the wall and opened its mouth, and the whole idea was that I had to walk into the jaws of the dragon and be consumed, which I did with some hesitation. But when I came out of it, I felt utterly renewed. And then the next time I went back into my mindscape, my inner realm, the whole place had changed. The place was like just blooming with poppies everywhere, red poppies. The sky was different. There was an extra moon there. There's so many other symbolic changes that had occurred within that realm. And it was all because this deity, this spirit, had guided me in a certain way through my inner realm. Since then, I've been working with Belial to overcome certain obstacles that I've faced as a result of my kind of troubled past anyway. Fears that I've grown up with, illusions that I've grown up with. Belial's helped me to strip those away and become a generally more confident person. And he said iniquity doesn't necessarily pertain to what the Christians would believe is just sex and debauchery. Iniquity is the mindset of being able to go forth through life enjoying everything. It's like hedonism. It's like try everything just once to get that experience and go through life without fear and with this thirst for enjoyment and just wanting to experience everything that you can so that you can grow as a person. And that's what this spirit has actually really helped me to do. So if any of you, through the course of your practice, when invoking deity or working with deity of any kind, or if you have an unexpected visitor and, you know, there are any similarities between it and what I've described in this video, then, you know, it's worth bearing in mind that you attract what you fear, typically. So if you encounter this deity and you go into that communication without fear or expectation, then it's more likely going to be a beneficial relationship that you have with that spiritual entity. So I've rambled on long enough, so I'll leave it there for now. I'm going to do my C and D videos over this next week and get those out to you by the end of the month. So until then, I wish you all much love and many blessings, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.